a principle that is very much a part of how God wants His church to live and to respond to one another from the standpoint of just the togetherness. That I don't believe it's just a matter of assembling, and we'll get to that concept in a moment, but just the reality of living together in communion and togetherness and contact and connectedness and all of those things, to make sure that we are interactive with one another to the degree, and I believe that I can look across this room and I can see vast majority of those who are here who have had contact with one another for, let's just use a safe number, for 25 years, maybe for longer than that with some of you. And talking about this concept may be just kind of like, well, yeah, let's just move on from this, because this really doesn't apply, because we've always lived in Stigler, we've always worshiped here, we've always, we wouldn't know anything else. And that's not to criticize that at all, but at the same time, as we have experienced over the years, since I've been here, and I'm coming up on just 4 years with you, there's still that need to make sure that we include everybody, that those who maybe don't have the family connection that the majority do, those people that don't have that connection need it desperately. And when it talks about being together and having all things in common, that's part of what the church is to be about, everything in common. Let me just ask you, what does that mean to you when you read the fact that they had everything in common? Okay. Okay, be more specific. What do you mean by that?
Supposed to all worship like the Bible says,
Uh-huh.
and not make up your own religion.
Okay.
Or in physical, you're supposed to give to others as they need.
So basically, we're talking about believing alike, thinking alike, that type of thing. Sharing each other's stuff. In other words, if I have something you need, then I should be willing to share it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else? Let me ask you this. When it talks about thinking of having all things in common, what about likes and dislikes? You have to share those things?
He doesn't love his brother is worse than a murderer.
Okay, yeah, that's true. So do we have all things in common from the standpoint of sharing our likes and our dislikes? Okay, yeah.
We are a group of individuals with our own likes and dislikes, but when it comes to the unity and the fellowship, my likes and dislikes go out the door.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just my fellowship, it's just not my things I want.
Mm-hmm.
It has to have, as Robert says, it comes together, okay? It has to be for the good of everyone.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Even young married couples, they got right in on one goal, but because they've come out from two different families, the sociology books used to say, and I want to say anymore, it took just at least a year just to get used to living with each other because of the different, well,
Yep.
And so that's why the people here, we gotta, we don't know the things like, so
That's one reason in premarital counseling, one of my first questions to a young couple is, where are you going to spend the holidays? And it probably won't surprise you that probably 80% of the time they both say, at my house. And they're not, I mean, he's not talking about her house and she's not talking about his house. They're talking about where they've always spent holidays. And then they look at each other like they've got worms coming out of each other's ears, you know? No, we're not, we're doing it like I've always done it. And so, you know, but the point is made from the standpoint of having an understanding. I know some of you won't agree with me on some things, but you don't know what they are, do you? Because it doesn't make any difference. You know what I do believe. That does make a difference. And what I preach, that does make a difference. So that has, you know, that's part of it. But what about strengths and weaknesses? Do we have strengths in common, weaknesses in common?
let's use our strength to bring up their weaknesses, and they're going to use their strength to bring up our weaknesses.
Exactly. So, you know, if we look at somebody and they're struggling with something that maybe we've never struggled with, does it cause us to look down our noses at them? Does it cause us to make judgments, unfair judgments? Because, you know, if you talk about this concept of judgment and discernments and things like that, there's a place for those things in the right context. But, you know, when it comes to, you know, sometimes we say that opposites attract, right? Is that true in the church? Not necessarily. Sometimes they do, don't they?
We're all going to be different ways, not that was the case with all the robots that you programmed
Yeah,
to be the same way, but I mean, we're all working for the same direction.
right.
That doesn't have a give and take.
And so one of the things that I really want us to think about is just what you know, we've got some new folks that have just moved in. The Taylors just moved in. We've got another family, the Longs from Wyoming. They're probably going to be here within a month, something like that. They're probably listening to us right now. So yeah, we're talking about you, Justin and Ashley. Anyway, you know, they're not. They didn't grow up in Stigler. They're from one of those fern countries called Wyoming. You know, it's where they lived recently. You know, so their concepts may not perfectly line up with ours. I believe, I have no doubt that as I referred to a little bit ago, the important things line up. But they're going to have strengths and weaknesses. A little less than 4 years ago, you invited me in, and you didn't know my weaknesses because I was making sure you knew my strengths at that time. And so, but now you know, and you still put up with me. You haven't run me out the door yet. But the point is that we need to make sure that we go the second mile in understanding other people, to understand that there is a difference in backgrounds, things that maybe people struggle with that you don't struggle with, or maybe a lot of times the things that we look down on other people about are things that we have a struggle with ourselves, but we're much harder on the other person who struggles with the same thing that we struggle with. And so it causes us to have that division between us because of the fact that we sometimes adopt a defensive mechanism in ourselves rather than being submissive to the needs of other people.
When we have new members in the body, that's when I see the coming together is so important. Because as you're saying, when they come into this group of people, they're bringing everything with them. Their baptism did not get rid of their raising.
Oh, no.
And they're bringing everything with them. And it is so essential that they find a place where they can feel like they're needed and have a part, or they will start to leave.
Oh, yeah.
And fall away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Right.
so what the point you're trying to make is so essential. It's essential for us that have been Christians for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
but for new Christians, acceptance, okay? They're a baby.
Right.
Just like a baby has to learn everything, they have to learn everything. So,
Well, you're exactly right. But on the other side, there's also the possibility that they're not babies, that they are mature Christians, but they still don't see eye to eye
I agree.
with us. With
No, that's true.
and I think that bears some consideration on our part to realize that, as I referred to, not everyone grew up in Stigler, Oklahoma.
But Paul explains it as we're all different parts of a physical body.
Mm-hmm.
We all have purposes,
Mm-hmm.
and if we move away from me over to the we, I mean, that addresses what you're talking about.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. And so, as far as, I think we all have a little bit of natural tendencies that we will, have a connection with people up to a point. But what keeps us from really being family type of close with the church family?
We don't always agree with everything they say.
Okay? But Judy, I'm going to pick on you because so if I know that you and I don't agree, and I know that maybe you have a belief in a certain area, what keeps me from saying, okay, I don't agree with you on that, here's what I believe in that regard? What do you think it keeps me from being open about what I believe and divulging that to you?
I think you're afraid that that person won't be receptive to that. I mean, I think most of the people that I'm fairly close with here
Yeah.
realize I grew up as a Baptist. I had wonderful parents. We did a lot of gospel singing. My mother played the piano.
Mm-hmm.
I still struggle when I hear the church here go, we can't have this music, because I'm thinking that was such a big part of my church life. And so I struggle with that, because then I don't feel completely accepted into the church.
Okay.
Because of little things like that.
Well, and here's the thing. I'm not even going to go there, but I am going to talk about the concept. You just expressed some things that you kind of took a risk. I mean, of letting everyone know where you come from and what your beliefs are. I think there are several things that has to happen in order for that to take place. First of all, to a certain degree, we have to trust the people around us with the information that we share. Does that make sense? In other words, and believe me, I've been in situations myself where I revealed what my views were on some things, and it burned me. I mean,
I think we're afraid of the reaction we will get,
yeah.
on either way.
But to continue that, I have people that I believe I can tell anything to. I can tell them, you know, I can be completely open and honest.
But I bet even those people in some fashion or form prove to you their trustworthiness.
That's the word. The word is trust. In other words, to a degree, Judy just trusted us with what she just said.
Hey, Bob,
Hang on.
Okay.
And so there has to be that level of trust that takes place. Well, if Jake comes to me and wants to tell me something, and maybe it's sensitive information, and he's going to have to trust me, right? To a certain degree. That what am I going to do with that information? Am I going to judge? And am I going to be presumptive about who he is as a man, as a person? Or am I going to take what he gives me and with that information, and now that he and others in here have made themselves vulnerable with the information that they share, then comes the question of, do I earn their trustworthiness? In other words, can they tell me that without me jumping down their throats, being judgmental, being presumptive about them?
Or going to other people and telling the whole thing.
That's a big one. That's a big one. Of going to someone else. Because you see, if we, let me back up. I don't want to say if. When we get to the point of having the connectedness and the commonality that the church truly needs to have, and I can look across this room, and there are going to be family units that have that. I mean, your physical family units are probably going to have that, because you're pretty much going to know what goes on, in your extended family anyway. But what about those of us who don't have that? Now what happens? Am I willing to make myself vulnerable? Do I trust you with this information? And if I do, Kathy's point was very valid. What are you going to do with that information? You going to just talk about it with everybody else? Or are you going to say, okay, this is something I need to talk about with Bob? And to me, that's one of the highest levels of love that can take place among a body of people, is when we have the love, that when we have these differences, that we go to the person. Folks, I've been barbecued just from the standpoint of, if they had just come to me and asked me, there would have been so much less conflict. But by the fact that they would go to that person, that person, that person, that person, and in the case of a preacher, ultimately it gets to the elders, and the elders say, ask you about it, and you give them the answer, and they're like, so what's the problem? There is no problem if they would have just given me the benefit and the blessing of being able to answer the question face to face without telling everybody else.
Love and communication is the secret to the whole
Absolutely. And that's, I'm going to really pound on that right now. I'll get to you in a moment, Kathy. Communication is very difficult, but communication is essential. And that's an area that we really need to cover our P's and Q's on an ongoing basis, is on the issue of communication.
And that's, for me, is kind of, I can remember from my teenage years, a song that said we are one in the bond of love.
Mhm.
And to me, that's this commonality, is that we have that bond because of love. My differences should not, okay, you need a certain amount of faith to tolerate my differences and let God take care of that, but your love helps me move forward and grow. And if my differences need to change or be different, they'll change and be different solely because of your love.
Exactly. Here's a principle, and you're exactly right. And here's the way Jesus stated it in Matthew chapter 18. He said, if you go to a person and he listens, what does he say results from that? You have gained a brother. Write that down in your brain. You have gained a relationship. You have minimized or obliterated difference, that you've taken away division, and you've brought about unity and harmony and togetherness and connectedness and understanding and all of those intangibles that a church has to have in order to not just survive, but to grow. I wonder how many churches' real growth has been inhibited by the fact that we struggle with those relationship issues. I think that when we talk about in Acts 2 of them having everything in common, we have so many distractions. We've talked about that. We have so many distractions in our world. You look at culture in those days, and there was probably a lot more time available for them to get together on a daily basis and interact with one another and all those things. They didn't have Facebook and telephones and interaction on an electronic level. They just had eyeball to eyeball. But just think of the time spent so wisely in just developing relationships. I really think that that's a lot of what that the church, I think, is challenged with in the 21st century. Look at verse 46. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. Got a trick question. When was the last time you broke bread? Like this breaking of bread. When was the last time you broke bread? This morning? See, I don't think this is talking about the Lord's Supper. I think verse 42 is talking about the Lord's Supper. I don't think that.
12:30 p.m. when I broke bread.
They were talking about having meals together at home.
Yeah. Is that what it's talking about? Potluck? House to house? Okay. They were hanging out with each other, right? You think they ate and ran? I don't think so. Everything I got into the books as far as reference books and all those things and really studied this concept. And what we're talking about, folks, is, I don't know about y'all, but it's kind of died a little bit with some physical deaths in our family. We don't do it as much as we did when my mom and dad were alive and when my older sisters were alive and all that stuff. We, especially around holidays, we'd show up early and we'd leave late and we would eat a bunch. But you know what else we did? We laughed and we talked and we played games and we shared our lives. And by the time that day was over, I did not want to leave because these were my people. I think that's the kind of concept that's talking about there, that they broke bread in their houses.
When we were younger, as young couples and kids, we were at each other's houses all the time. And as your kids get older and more active, then you kind of drifted, further away, not time. And you think we would get back to doing that, but we don't.
Yeah. Again, too many distractions, right? And I think about that. When I was growing up, we'd have Sunday dinner, and usually Mom would make a roast or fried chicken. And you know what happened when we got through? She'd clean up the dishes and everything, but she'd take the leftovers and put them in the middle of the kitchen table. She had a white tablecloth, and she'd throw it over all that stuff. Yeah, just left it right there. And Sunday night after church, there'd be so many people sitting around our kitchen table that nobody could sit at the table. It would have to be a big circle because there were too many people to sit around the table. And we ate leftover mashed potatoes, leftover gravy, leftover chicken, leftover green beans, I don't know. And Mom would usually try to make something else to go with it, some kind of, maybe some bread or something like that. But it didn't matter what we had to eat. And that's what we understood. We didn't come there to eat leftover chicken. We came there to talk and to connect and to be vulnerable and to be silly. And that's one of the things that I really built my youth ministry on back when I was in youth ministries, is I wanted those kids to be together on all levels, from the standpoint of they knew what each other was like when they got tired, when they got hungry, when they were happy, when they were sad, everything about that. And the way that I would want to do that is by taking overnight trips. Because they'd be on a bus, stuck on a bus together, and I was fortunate to work at places that had buses, and I'd get all these kids on this bus, and they'd be trapped, if you will, and they'd have to talk to each other. And to this day, I have my kids back then who are now grandparents, who have connections with each other and with me, because of the connection that they had in that context. And it didn't happen because of, and I'm not criticizing this, because of a youth focus. It was that, it was monthly devotionals, it was overnight trips, it was service projects, it was parties, it was everything that we could think of to get them together, to get them, and we created situations where they interacted and they talked to each other. Folks, the church needs that. We need to be eyeball to eyeball and relate to and talk to each other. Time for me to get off my soapbox.